Hello everybody, welcome to the third episode of KITHYM Art, How to Draw series. In the last video we covered the avatar of death, and how menacing of a foe it could be for unprepared parties. Well, in this episode we are hitting closer to our expectations of a challenge rating 0 monster, the Awakened Shrub. Not so spooky sounding, eh? An awakened shrub is indistinguishable from a normal shrub when motionless, and is often found in deep woods, the Feywild, or other places in which druidic magic reigns abundant. The awakened shrub makes a simple attack using its branches to rake at the enemy. The presence of an awakened shrub often indicates nearby sources of magic, a fairy circle, an enchanted forest, a rogue elf. Now, I have my reference ready for this creature and we'll show it to you in just a moment. Yeah, no one ever said the reference had to look pretty. So let's get down to it. Now, I don't often draw plants or shrubs or something of that sort, so my reference is a bit of a cobbled together mishmash of a bush and some flowers, so I'm going to go ahead and have something of that sort for a creature, and I'm going to do the general outline of this bushel of flowers. I think it's got a bit of a cylinder kind of appearance. And since our face, if we can call it that, is going to be up here, I'm going to use that same cross method I was telling you about in the other videos, just to indicate where we're going to put the features on there. Now I'm going to do another one where I can tell where my eyes are going to go, just to keep it a bit proportional. Okay. And let me go ahead and do the mouth just a bit. This creature is pretty much going to be talking through the leaves in its face, so it's not going to be something that's completely visible, but it is something that we need to know that's there, just to kind of give the appearance of this thing having a life of its own. And again, this is such a weak monster that it doesn't have to be extremely vicious, it just has to be fantastic. And my reference, I have arms of where this creature's going to be, so I'm going to go ahead and draw those there as well. So going back to another tip that I said about anatomy, you can see I'm drawing as if there would be shoulders, as if there would be elbows, and right here hands and like a fist. Again, this obviously has different proportions than a human or some sort of other creature, but that knowledge of anatomy is going to let you know how much space to have between the shoulder and elbow and where the wrist and the hand meets, and that's going to allow you to exaggerate features and come up with these unique creations such as this one. And again, I'm going to go ahead and time lapse a bit here. Okay. And now you can see I have the pose of my creature as it is, as well. I drew some base just to make the background look a bit more interesting. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and outline some of these limbs here and give it more depth, and then I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning up a bit so I can do some detail on the leaves as well as where the flowers will be going. So I'm going to go ahead and time lapse once again. Okay, so now we can see we have a bit of a silhouette of this awakened shrub and what we want it to look like, and we're just about ready to start adding the details for the roots and the leaves and the flowers up top. But I just want to point out a couple things really quick. So again, anatomy, the more you start to study different creatures, the more you start to understand the way bones can be in all manner of things, from humanoids to creatures to various, I guess, life forms. So for this one, I kind of have that backwards knee kind of phenomenon that you see in like goats and some sort of quadrupeds. But in this case, we're going to be using it to kind of enhance the knobbiness of the roots that are going to be here. So you can see we have looks like these knobby knees. That's going to look really great with that backwards knee phenomenon. And again, anatomically, that's not actually a backwards knee. It's just the ankle happens to be a lot higher. So you can see we have our thigh here, and we have it come down about here, and we have our ankle. That's yeah. So again, anatomy is going to allow you to do some really cool tricks to make your creatures look a bit more appealing. Also for this fist right here, you can see I have my shoulders going up to my head, but also I have a very relatively straight line for the entire form. There's not much definition into it, and again, since this is going to be a simplistic creature, I'm not going to get too bogged down with details in the sense of excessive outlinings and, as I say, excruciating detail. So I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse again and start adding some more of the leaves and see if we can do something with the flowers up top. So really quick, I want to say something about these flowers that I'm drawing. One thing I noticed when drawing things that are carrying a lot more details than the rest of the figure is that you want things that are closer to have the majority of the details that you're showing. For example, this flower, since it's up close, I want this one to be one of the most outlined, as well as I want to be able to see all the individual lines that would be on the petals, as well as the interior of the flower. And for the ones in the back, like this one right here, you can see in the corner, I kind of just have a suggestion of a flower. Like you can't even really see what's going on here. And that again is to keep the eye from becoming too overwhelmed with so much going on in different parts of the scene that you don't want to distract from the overall piece. If the person spends more time looking at the flowers than the actual figure we've drawn, it kind of defeats the purpose of drawing the figure. So just something to keep in mind. As well as I cannot for the life of me tell you what kind of flowers these are, so these are just off of reference. So if these don't look like flowers, I'm doing my best to suggest that they might be flowers, and yeah. Oh, and one more thing. When drawing details on top of a creature or around a creature or just in general, symmetry is a great rule of thumb to try to follow. So you can see that I have this flower is almost dead center with where his face would be, as well as these ones that kind of flank it on the side, and you have these two furthest ones on the left and right side, as well as I have, you know, some in the back, then a couple up top, then again in the back and the center. So symmetry will also help in having the piece flow together as one. So if there was like, you know, like 5 flowers on this side that were all just clustered together, and there was a huge split, like a bald spot on this guy, and then more flowers on this side, it would look a bit off. So you just kind of want to fill whatever space we can to give that impression that everything actually flows together nicely. Okay, and we're about done with the flowers on the head, so now I'm going to go ahead and go back down to the mouth and the eyes and fill out those details there. In the beginning of this video, you might have asked why it was taking me so long to even detail the flowers up top. Is because this is just a personal preference, but whenever I find there's going to be something that's particularly stressful in an image to draw, in the sense that there's going to be meticulous detail and planning, it's better to just do the parts that come easier first, just to keep yourself engaged in the piece. Because the last thing I want is to be working on this and start with the flowers and get so exhausted, I guess I could say, that I don't see the overall appearance of what's going on, that I stop halfway through and I just start a different sketch. So for this one, I just wanted to kind of leave the flowers for almost last, just because there's so many of them and I could tell it's going to be a bit difficult, so I didn't want to overwhelm myself that fast. I'm just going to draw a couple more flower buds onto there before I actually get down to drawing the mouth. Just again for symmetry purposes, to kind of close whatever bits of space are a bit of an eyesore in my opinion. Okay. Now, let's see what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and give him those googly eyes that we did in the reference picture, because I feel like that fits the character of a plant that's just been awakened and is very grumpy. Like if this plant was wise, it would know that the couple of travelers are just gonna stomp it back into the ground, so it's no real use for this thing to be fighting. But hopefully your characters are merciful in your games. I know mine aren't. So for the mouth, I'm going to go ahead and outline this a bit dark, just because I don't want to go in and re-detail this part, since I already know it's just going to be suggestions of leaves. Okay, and then I can fill in the teeth. The same, just a bit heavy-handed, because I want this to stand out as well from all the detail that we're going to be putting into the leaves that are around the bush. Okay. So now he's just about done. All he needs is a bit of details on the roots and the leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and do the roots first. And I'm just going to do a couple scraggly lines that just go all the way down to the bottom of the figure in places where it looks natural. So when drawing roots and stuff, for these lines I tend to do a lot of wiggly, shaky stuff into it. Just to, let me get a bit of a focus on that. Just to give the impression that these things are growing naturally and kind of swirling about each other. And then sometimes it helps to kind of double up your lines, but not on top of each other like I'm doing right now. Just to give it more of a detailed appearance without having to actually put too much thought into where these are going. So you can see that kind of looks already rooty in itself. Do something for its arm. But I don't want to distract too much from the center of the body, so I'm going to keep these lines flowing with the hand. So again, this kind of covers the rhythm and flow thing I was talking about in a different video, where all these lines are kind of going with the wrist, with the way the hand is moving, with the fingers. There's never any lines that are going perpendicular to this figure in a way that's going to interrupt what's happening, that you can't read it anymore. So for example, if I were to put a line right here kind of in this way, it would kind of break the impression that this is a root, and it starts to look more like something that's bone. Like it changes the texture just to have these lines facing unnatural to the way that roots and trees would go. Roots and trees just grow straight out. So well, for the most part, the lines into these roots and trees just grow straight out. Okay. So now let's go ahead and detail this guy. In my reference, my leaves are clustered in bits of 3 like this, so I'm going to go ahead and do leaves like so. And again, I'm not paying too much attention to where the center of these are going to be. It's just to the point where it kind of covers the empty space, and everything else will be filled by the more we do these patterns. So when doing patterns such as this, it's better to start from up top and work your way down. That way you don't get stuck somewhere and have something odd sticking out. But the more you do patterns like this, just very lightly like I'm doing, you can actually make some of those mistakes and blend things in pretty well, to the point where you can't actually tell, you know, that there is something that doesn't quite make sense, because again, like, no one's really looking at the minor details of what's going on down here. For example, this leaf right here looks a bit odd, but hey, with the whole ensemble of what's going on, it's not even noticeable. Up here, I'm gonna go ahead and just do a bit of lines just to fill whatever empty spaces in there. And now for here, I'm gonna go ahead and lightly do some leaves. We still want to keep the appearance that this is. See, look at that. Even got a nose for him just out of a leaf. And we can even continue this further and get more of his mustache with these leaves. Sometimes things just work out like that. A big rule of thumb for that is the function over form. I had to remember for a second there. It's easy to get mixed up. But it's the idea that if something can make sense, if it functions properly, then it can be made to look pretty. Because if you draw something that doesn't function properly and you're just focused on making it look pretty, you're going to run into some complications if you ever try to, say, animate it in 3D or do something else with it. It's going to, you know, like, the biggest example on that is shoulder pads with spikes. And the reason why this is a bad example for function over form is that they actually, if you have shoulder pads with spikes and you raise your arms, you're going to end up stabbing yourself in the head. So that's it's an immediate example of why it's important to make something work properly before it looks pretty. So I'm just about done with this figure. I'm going to go ahead and do a bit thicker outlines on the edges just to go ahead and finish this up. But let me time lapse that. Alright, and there you have it, an awakened tree. Now it's up to you or your players if you want to decide to put him back into the ground or if you want to just let him get some sleep. But I suggest stealth challenges, definitely maybe get around from this guy and not have to end up waking him up. They're not exactly a big threat, but if your forest happens to be magical like one of the ones I've done, the forest might be very angry of you killing their children that are just little shrubs trying to take a nap. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the Challenge Rank 0 Awakened Shrub, and this is video number 3. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next one. Hope you enjoyed it.